Welcome to part 4 of the Pendle Witch story. We're in the very, very epicentre of the story now. We're in Newchurch in Pendle, the home of Anne Whittle and her daughter Anne Redfern, commonly known as Bessie Chattox. Now, we mentioned that young Jeanette Devise told the court about crimes that had taken place at Malkin Tower, where these little clay dolls were made with human hair and human teeth. Where did that human hair come from, the teeth? Well, here in Newchurch Cemetery itself. It's said that Chattox came across her familiar fancy that appeared first of all in the shape of a boy with a grey coat on, that turned into a dog, and then could turn into a cat, etc. So we're very, very much in the centre of our story. Now, as well as the Pendle Witches, there were a group of people known as the Samlesbury Hall Witches. Samlesbury Hall is a beautiful Tudor building not too far from where we are now. In the next cell to the Pendle Witches were Jane Southworth and her two best friends, the Brearley sisters. They were twins. Jane heard this huge roar on the 20th of August 1612, and she climbed onto the shelter of her two friends and looked out of the grille of her cell at Lancaster. There she could see the Pendle Witches in a long line standing on trestles. She then heard this huge roar and saw the trestles being kicked up underneath them. For a girl of 20 years old, this must have been terribly traumatic. She then heard the sounds of footsteps that got louder and louder and louder. A key was placed in the cell door opened, and there was Mr. Thomas Cavell, the head jailer of Lancaster City Castle. "Right, you three, just dealt with that lot, it's your turn next, follow me." The three of them must have felt terrified, in particular Jane, who just witnessed the executions. They made their way up the twisting staircase and into the courts that had just dispatched the Pendle Witches. They stood in front of James Altham, Edmund Bromley, Thomas Potts, Roger Noel, William Holden and John Bannister. The same jury, which consisted just of men. Women, in that period of time, were not allowed to sit in juries. The three of them made their way into the building and stood in front of James Altham and Edmund Bromley. They brought in another child witness, a little girl called Gracie Salberts. Grace was only 7 years old. She was picked up, put on top of the desk, just like Alison had been, young Jeanette Devise had been in the morning. And the judges said, "Right, young lady, we'd have your testimony against these witches." "I will, sir. I was walking along the banks of the River Ribble. It was a beautiful hot summer's day, sir. I saw Jane Southworth and the two Brearley sisters swimming in the river, sir. I then saw these dogs. I've never seen the breed before, sir. Huge backs, long noses, cloven hooves. They jumped into the river. They materialised into human beings, sir. Slightly dark-skinned human beings. They picked up all three women, danced in a circle, paired off for a meal. I then watched from a distance, sir, as fraternisation was taking place with these demonic spectres. On the second day, Ellen Brearley came to see me. Sir, she changed from a woman into a dog and tried to suffocate me under a blanket of straw, but I escaped, sir. On the third day, I was met by Jane Southworth and the two sisters again, sir. They said, 'Gracie, would you like to have a bit of fun?' I said, 'What do you mean fun?' 'Well, at Samlesbury Hall, a little boy's just been born, of the name of Thomas Walshman.' 'So?' said Gracie. 'We'd like to drink his blood.' 'No, I don't want to get involved in that,' said Grace. Sir, in the dead of night, they made their way to Samlesbury Hall. They picked up the little boy from his cot, sir. They pricked his stomach over 4 nights, sir, consumed his blood, and he died, sir. James Altham picked up the gavel. 'We find you guilty, witch, and you'll die like the rest.' Before the gavel came down, his companion, Bromley, said, No, let her finish her testimony. Sir, in the dead of night, they came back to the cemetery. They dug up the coffin, sir. They took the baby out of the coffin. They boiled the baby's flesh. They ate the flesh and kept some body fats to enable them to change shape, sir. That was it. This time, it was Bromley who brought the gavel up. 'Right, we find you guilty, which you'll die like the rest this morning.' Before the gavel came down, Jane pulled off a miracle. 'Sir, I beg of you, sir, to cross-examine this young girl, sir. She's been manipulated by a Catholic priest hiding at Samlesbury Hall, sir.' Just that one word, Catholicism, made the judges sit back. 'You're an Anglican, you say?' 'I am, sir. I'm married into the Southworth family, sir. They've never liked me because of my Anglican views, sir. This young girl's been manipulated by a Catholic priest to falsely incriminate me and my two friends, sir. Please cross-examine her. That word, Catholicism, seems to have turned the tables. They took Gracie next door. You can imagine Jane and the two Brearley sisters must have felt on tenterhooks. Would they live? Would they die? A while later, the court was reassembled. James Altham, Edmund Bromley, Thomas Potts, Roger Noel, William Holden and John Bannister. In the light of new evidence, we find you, Jane Southworth, Eugene and Ellen Brearley, innocent of the crimes against you. You are free to go. The three of them hugged each other. They jumped for joy. They'd survived the noose. Sir Richard Southworth arrived from Sandbury Hall to pick up all three women to take them back to the hall. As Jane turned, she saw the city of Lancaster. She saw the pillory. She saw the Pendle Witches hanging and blowing in the wind. At the end of the pillory, she saw 3 empty nooses and realised she'd not only saved her life, but the lives of her 2 friends as well. But the story, in many ways, is just beginning. For over hundreds of years, people have argued between the Pendle Witches and the Sandbury Hall Witches. And in the year 1805, in the village of Worley near Clitheroe, 2 local doctors sat round a roaring fire. Dr. Whittaker, Dr. Dawson. And Dawson said to Whittaker, "I believe the Pendle Witches were probably telling the truth, and indeed the Sandbury Hall Witches." "How?" "Well, this young girl, Grace Sarberts, she mentioned she'd seen these dogs that looked very like Tib, Ball, Fancy, belonging to Demdike, Chattox and Redfern. I believe they're the dogs she saw that day, but also let's get permission from the Church of England to exhume the Walsham grave." They wrote to York Minster, and York Minster dispatched a priest by the name of Reverend John Franks, and under Church of England supervision, they found the grave, and they started to dig. Just 3 feet beneath the surface, they came across a lozenge-shaped child's coffin. It was opened under Church of England jurisdiction and found to contain absolutely nothing. Who knows? Young Gracie Sarberts may just have been telling the truth. We shall never, ever know. What I can tell you, folks, is the Pendle Witch story is a sad one. It's documented by Thomas Potts' book, and that's the only window we have in this whole story, which took place over 409 years ago. But what is amazing is when the snows come to Pendle Hill, the last piece of snow to melt has always been the perfect shape of a white witch. And I've heard many, many people, when they've looked towards Pendle Hill, to say the words, Pendle Hill is seductive, hypnotic and exceptionally spooky. And there we have the Pendle Witch story. Thank you very much indeed.
So where can people find you if they want to look on your website or book you for tours and stuff?
I'm a professional tour guide. I run my own tours, which are simply Top Hat Tours Info. You'll find that under www.tophattoursInfo. I've got a book called Ghostly Tales of Unexplained, and I have a whole host of videos on YouTube which go under Tales from the Grave. Simon Entwistle, Tales from the Grave. It's been an absolute pleasure to be with Lee and Lindsay today, and as you know, folks, it's a great honour to be with them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for telling your stories and the story of the Pendle Witches.
My pleasure.
Thank you.